Half steps, whole steps. What are they? How do we understand them? How do we apply them as we seek to understand and make music theory more simple? Now, I had done a massive review in the last video before this one, where I talked about really everything that I did a summary of everything that I've done up until now. And then I introduced half steps and whole steps, because in order to move on from understanding the musical alphabet, how there's sharps and flats in between, the musical note, the letter notes, and the fact that there's intervals and everything in music. In order to better understand this, we need to advance and introduce things like the major scale. And I like that name because it's major. It's really important. It's really important for really understanding everything else that we're going to be building off of this scale. But before I can really even explain what a scale is, you need to first have the building blocks of knowing what notes are, knowing what letters and maybe letters that have sharps or flats on them are assigned to those notes. And you also need to understand the basics of how intervals are built. And so we're going to be explaining things in terms of half steps and whole steps, so we can move on into the major scale. All right, just a backdrop. The half step is defined as an interval, which is the distance between two notes, right? The half step is defined as the smallest interval that we use. So like two notes that are immediately next to each other on a piano, let's say. That's a half step interval. Now we know from our study of the musical alphabet and the sharps and flats that B and C don't have a note in between, right? So that means that they're literally right next to each other, which means that the interval between a B and a C is a half of a step. And also, likewise, E and F don't have a note in between physically. And so what that means is that E and F on an instrument are literally right next to each other. And therefore, the interval or the distance between those two pitches between E and F is a half of a step, a half step. So a whole step is two notes away, so half of a step is one note away. So it's the smallest unit that we're going to think of when it comes to intervals. A half step, okay? Let's do some other notes that are a half step apart. Well, any sharp or flat note is going to be half a step away from the reference note. So if I say A flat, what I'm doing is I'm taking the note A and I'm making it flat, right? I'm lowering it by one note, but we can be more specific and say I'm lowering A by a half step, because a half step is one note away. That's the distance. So A and A flat are a half step away from each other. Okay. C and C sharp are half step away from each other. What's C sharp? Well, it's the note above C. The sharp sign means to raise C by one note, but to the next available higher note. Okay, so what you have then is you take C and you raise it by one note to the note above C. So C sharp is that note that's above C. It's a way of thinking about it. they're half a step away from each other. Okay? So if BC and EF, like BC-EF rule, if BC is a half step, they're half step away from each other, and EF is a half step away from each other. But all of the other letters have sharps and flats in between. What that means then is that all of the other letters are a whole step away from each other. A and B are a whole step apart. That's the interval. Okay, there's other names for these intervals that will use more musical names, but the exact distance, how many steps do I have to take? How many times do I have to jump over to the next note, right? Steps. Half steps is really, right? Each jump to the next note is a half step, and 2 is a whole step. So A and B is a whole step apart. But how do I prove that? Well, A, go a half step up. A sharp. Go a half step up again. A sharp to B. A sharp and B are a half step apart. See? So A to A sharp is a half step, and now from A sharp to B is another half step. So 2 half steps to get from A to B. 2 half steps makes a whole step. Okay? And you could do this between, you could practice between all of them. Let's say you go from G to F, but you're going backwards and thinking in like flat mode. G, G flat, F. I've done drills for all of these on the channel here. I got short videos going through these that I'll be posting. I haven't posted all of them, but I'm working on it. They'll be all up shortly. And you have G, G flat, F, right? G to G flat, it's a half step down. G flat to F is another half step down. G flat is the note between G and F. So since you have to go down twice from G to get to F, it's 2 half steps, and which equals a whole step. So all of the letters of the musical alphabet are a whole step apart from each other, with the exception of B, C, and E, F, which are a half step apart from each other, is how we can say it, and being more technically sort of correct. Okay? So this is what half steps and whole steps are all about. There's another way you could think, right? You could start on a sharp or a flat and go a whole step away. So let's do this drill. Let's say like we're on D sharp, right? This is, well, let me not use a tricky one. Let's do like F sharp, right? F sharp, go up 1 half step, or 1 note. It's going to be G. Now go up 1 more half step, G sharp. So F sharp to G sharp is a whole step. Likewise, from G sharp to F sharp is a whole step going downwards. So from one letter of the sharp to the next is a whole step too. Or likewise with flats, from B flat to A flat is a whole step. B flat to B, B flat to A flat. So B flat, you're going down, the next note is A, and then the next note is A flat. A flat, 2 jumps, 2 half steps is a whole step, okay? And so these are things that you start to sort of get a handle on more and more as time goes by. I gotta like take a picture here. Like I literally got customers. You wouldn't believe how horrible newspaper customers are. So like I just gotta like, right? I gotta show it in case this person, you know, they don't really pay us for our labor over here. And then they lie about not getting it and stuff like this. whole different story. But anyway, I'm just literally putting in my video in case I need my camera to take a picture in case they lie, you know, because we get threatened a lot over here. Anyhow, what else is new, right? It's like universal now. Like ever since I came back from living overseas and well, trying to go to medical school, which is what I don't want to turn this into my life story. What in the world? Once upon a time, I went to medical school overseas, and like things didn't work out, and I had to come back temporarily, but it ended up being permanent. But like that wasn't after the burst of the bubble in 2008, and like to me, like everything changed ever since then. It's not like the quality, like jobs were way easier to work for then, with a lot less drama, a lot less harassment, a lot less of everything that like sucks. So anyway, you'll start to pick up on all of these different nuances and tricks. A sharp is a half step away from its natural note, or the letter without the sharp or flat. And the sharp notes are a whole step away from each other. So like F sharp is a whole step away from G sharp, G sharp's a whole step away from A sharp, like this. And likewise, the same thing, like D flat is a whole step away from C flat, right? But what's C flat? C flat is really B. So there's an exception. The B, C, and E, F creates dynamics like this. That's tricky. Okay, so don't worry about it for now. Just count one half step at a time and see where you land. Sometimes if you're going over to B and C, you'll end up with a weird situation. But like if you're not passing over to B, C, or to E, F, it's going to be okay, like G flat and A flat. There's no B, C, or E, F in between that range, so it ends up being a whole step between G flat and A flat. Right? But if you go down from G flat, a whole step away will be F flat. But F flat is actually E, because the note F flat means take F and go to the note that's below F, right? The note below F is actually E, because there's no, okay? So remember, like, I'm just gonna put this right here in this video because it's better to not wait too long. Especially if you're trying to learn from sheet music where they show all of the signs on the letters stuff, like, which I'm not gonna teach. I might not teach it at all, but I'll probably teach sheet music at some point, like the basics of how to read. But I can't do that out here. Either way, when you're in front of sheet music, you need to recognize things. That's its own skill. But you can't really understand what you're looking at if you don't understand these concepts mentally first. So even if you want to learn to read, you need to understand this stuff to be able to read better. Understand? Like reading is familiarity with how it looks and understanding the theory concepts that I'm talking about here. So like I was saying, F flat. What's F flat? Well, it's take the letter F and lower it by one note. How far am I lowering it? A half step. Okay, see how it all fits together? I'm lowering F by a half step to make an F flat. What happens is, on a physical instrument, I'm gonna play an E, because there's no note between E and F. So when I go lower by one note, I'm gonna be on E. Hope that makes sense what I'm saying. I will break out a piano at some point, even though I don't really have. I just got like a MIDI controller that I could use to show, but I can't again. I'm gonna have to find time at my house sometimes to make some of these. But you have the note physically below F is E, so F flat is E. It's just like the sharps and the flats have more than one name. sometimes F and B, C, and E, F can have more than one name. F, like E could be called F flat, or F can be called E sharp, because the note above, you take E, you raise it by one note, you're now at F. Right? It's not that common, but it happens in certain situations. In certain situations that I can't talk about yet because you're not there yet. But excuse me. B and C likewise. B has one, the name of B is B. But you can also think of it, depending on if the context forces you to do it, what's going on right now, like in the musical context you're in, you could be forced at times to think of B as C flat, the note below C. And likewise, you could be forced to think of a C, instead of C, you could be forced to think of it as a B sharp. Okay? I'm not like a super expert in this stuff because, listen, the reality is I mostly play by ear and feel, but it just goes to show you, you want to know a little bit, and you want to have the stuff filed away easy in your head. You don't want to be ignorant of certain things. Even if you're like me and you don't like to read and you like to play by ear and feel, you should know your stuff a little bit. It will help you out in situations that you might encounter. There have been times that I have learned musical pieces just by looking at the sheet music and finding out, like, go try to learn Moonlight Sonata on a piano. You're gonna run into some funky things that you don't understand because you don't know music theory. And when you find yourself with a piece of sheet music, it's relentless. It don't care if you don't know. It's like if you can't read the writing, you know, that's up on the billboard. The billboard don't care. Either you're gonna learn, like either you can read or not. And like if the ad is in Chinese, I'm in trouble. If the ad, if the sign is saying "Do not proceed, caution," there's polar bears over here, but it's written in Chinese or Russian, I ain't seeing it. Like I'm not gonna be able to benefit from that information because I can't read. It's like that with sheet music, but the sheet music is so brutal because it's like, well, if you don't know the music theory concepts, I'm just gonna write this down. I'm gonna write E sharp, and you'll be like, what's that? What in the world? E sharp? I don't know, what am I looking at right now? There's no E, like, I have E, I got F right next, look, what? See? It's just a note that's above E, which happens to be F. I'll go into more detail to explain it. I gotta explain scales first. I gotta explain the major scale first. And the major scale needs to be described in terms of whole steps and half steps. This video is whole steps and half steps. Alright. I put most of the concepts in the first few minutes. And then it was just a bunch of like examples. But I think this should suffice. I'll drop a couple of short form videos reinforcing concepts, trying to make it as simple to understand as possible, and then we're gonna go on. I think we're ready to go on and start the major scale after this. And congratulations, we're gonna start to get to the point where we start to actually explain the concepts that will create what you know as music. I'll see you next time.